And now you can move around. However, as you see, you're just T-posing around, so check out my video about animating your character. In the last video we created our beautiful character. Check out the next step is to animate our character. So let's do it. But what exactly are we going through? First we're going to go through control rigs and create one ourselves. Then we're creating the animations. After that we're going to go through how we connect the animations to the character. And finally we'll go through how we can transition between different animations. Okay, so control rigs. A control rig is a way for us to easily manipulate and control our character's bones for animation. Think of it like we are the puppet master, and the control rigs are strings to control the character. So the control rig on the screen are all the small shapes and things here that we have created. If we were to rotate this control, the bone it is assigned to will also move. But now some annoying, but still handsome, as all my followers are, might ask, why don't we just use the already created bones to animate it? Control rigs first off work very well with Unreal's already built-in animation system and blend spaces. But control rigs also have things like inverse kinematics, which makes it easier and faster to animate our characters. To understand what inverse kinematics are, we also have to know how the skeleton works. We went through it in the last video, but just quickly. The bones are parented to each other, which means that wherever, let's say, this bone does, this will follow. But wherever this bone does, this won't follow. This is known as forward kinematics. But if you now were to just rotate your hand, you can see that the forearm doesn't stay completely still, but it rotates along with the hand. You don't think about rotating your forearm, or you're thinking about rotating the hand. This is what inverse kinematics are, and we already have created nodes for us that make it much easier in control rigs. So if we were to rig our arm with inverse kinematics, we only have to move the hand to where we want it to be, and the arm would follow. This makes it much easier than if we just had the skeleton, as we now have to do all the changes ourselves. Okay, now that you hopefully understand what a control rig is, let's quickly, or at least kinda fast, it's not slow. It will take less than an hour. Hopefully. So to create the rig, we choose a skeleton mesh, then go to create and choose control rig. Okay, here we have the rig graph, which we will get into later. Here we have our mesh, here our skeleton, and here our details panel. If you for some reason don't have the windows that I have, you can go up here and choose them. Okay, so first we're going to create a control to move our entire character. Okay, we can do this by first choosing our root bone, then right clicking and choosing new control. As you see, this will create a new control for the root bone. Then scroll down, right click on the root control and choose unparent, as we don't want the bone to control the control, you know. That'd be crazy. Now change the shape to rounded square thick. Okay, we can now scale it down so it doesn't cover our whole character. We do this by choosing the control, going down to scale and making sure to hit this little lock. Just like you would lock your basement at night to keep people in, out. To keep people out. And then we can scale it to something about this, and then we can move it into place right under the character. You also have to right click and choose set offset transform from current. If we were to not do it and compile it, as you see, it will just move back into place. This is because we can use our window to change the pose of our character and test the rig out. But if all the changes were actually stored, it wouldn't work. Just like, okay, now we actually have to create the logic for this, and we do this by going to our rig graph, then right clicking and creating the node parent constraint. If you watched the first video where we created our extremely attractive character, you know about parenting, and this is the exact same thing. We can choose our root bone and then click here to choose it. Next we'll expand this, and for the parent we are choosing the root control and pressing here. Finally we just have to plug this in. So if we move the control, the whole character follows it. Okay, next we are creating the controls for spine and neck. Select all the spine and neck bones. Then right click, go to new and choose add controls for selected. Also remember to parent the root control to these controls so that they move with it. Expand the hierarchy and choose all the controls by holding down shift. Next we'll make them octagons, rotate them by 90 degrees and scale them down. Now we select our bones and drag them into the rig graph and then create an item array. Do the same things for our controls. Let's now add a FK chain, which takes in two arrays and rigs them together. We could of course do the same thing that we did with the root bone, but this is faster, and I'm known to always be the fastest. Even too fast. The head bone we created last time is necessary for Blender, and we were able to use it in there. But as you probably know, or at least now know, there's a lot of problems when exporting things from Blender to Unreal. Why? Yeah, Blender and Unreal. Why? Well, in this case it doesn't really matter, because as you see, the bone that was supposed to be a neck bone more or less works like a head bone for us, and this bone works like a neck bone. Okay, now we're going to do something else for the arms. We are going to use inverse kinematics. This means that the bones will adjust for our hand, and therefore we won't have to control them by ourselves. bones. We will only have to control where the hand is located, and the rig will calculate how the bone should look in that case for most natural look. To do this, we're going to add a so-called IK2 bone node. This will take in a chain of 3 bones and make them follow the thing that we specify as the end control. So choose this bone, and this bone. Let's create a control for our hand, which we will use as the end control, and a control for our elbow, which we will use as the pole vector node. However, we don't want the elbow control to parent the hand control. We want the opposite. So first unparent the hand control and then parent the elbow control to it. And then parent both to the root control. As you see, we can keep the shape and the color, we just have to scale the controls down a bit. Also, move the elbow control back behind the arm and set the transform from current. We then go to a rig ref and select our hand control as the end control. We also give our elbow control as the pole vector node. Now we have to give the axis. The first axis is the axis that points down the arm. This will tell the function what axis of the bones it is that will follow the control. If we choose one arm bone and then press here, we can see the bone's axis. And we can see that the axis pointing down of the arm is the opposite of the y-axis. Therefore, we're going to make this 0 and this -1. For the second graph, we're going to choose the axis that is pointing to the pole vector. So in our case, the z-axis. Plug it in, and as you see now, if I move the hand control, the arm will follow and pretty much keep its shape. And I can change where the elbow is by removing the pole vector node. Let's also do the same thing but for the other arm. Montage! And bam, we have arms. I want to challenge you a bit, so I want you to pause this video and rig the legs by yourself. Okay, I guess that most of you didn't actually pause the video, but this is how we would rig the legs. Again, we would use an IK2 bone node and passing these bones. And for the controls, we will create one for the feet and one for the thigh. However, the control for the knee would be in front of the leg instead of behind like the elbow, since your knees bend forward. Or at least they should. The forward axis would again be -y, but the secondary axis is x, as we want the knee to look forward at the knee control. It may look a bit but we're not here to become pro animators. We're here to make a cool character. Do the same thing for the other leg, and next we actually have to animate our character. Okay, to animate it, we're going to drag our control rig into the viewport, which will create a level sequence. Now before we get started, I'm just super quickly, I mean in just a few seconds, explain what keyframes are. We use keyframes when we are animating something. These keyframes represent different values over a period of time. Let's say that we have this hand at this x coordinate at the start. If we then have a keyframe 10 frames later with the hand placed at this x value, the program will, and this is very simplified, take the amount of x values that the hand will travel and then divide it over the frames that it has on it to take it to the new position. This means that the hand will have this x value 1 frame in and this 5 frames in. This creates an animation as the hand seems to be seamlessly moving. Okay, now we first enable this little option here. This makes it so that whenever we remove a control, a keyframe will be added during that frame automatically, so that we don't have to do it manually since we are lazy. We are also checking off the grid snapping as we want to animate our character freely. Next, click here to show us all our bones and their keyframes. We can also change the frame rate if we want to, and I will change it to, let's say, 60. So now we can start off by creating an idle animation. In other words, what the character will doing when it doesn't do anything. So we can first create a keyframe at the beginning and then change the character to how we want it to look at the beginning. I chose to have the arms pretty close and bend the knee of my character. Next, we can go something like 90 frames later and change it again to make it look like the character's breathing. Move out the arms a bit, maybe make it stand up more and expand its chest. Now first drag this red line to your final keyframe, and now go here and choose your character and right click. We then choose create linked animation sequence. And that's it, we have our animation. Oops, sorry, wrong animation. And we now have a beautiful animation. Okay, to apply this to our character, we first create an animation blueprint by right clicking and choosing the animation blueprint. Next, choose our character's skeletal mesh and press the create button. We then go into our animation blueprint and create a state machine. The state machine gives the final output pose a pose to actually perform. Plug it in and then head into the state machine. Here we'll create a new state which we'll call idle and then connect it to the entry. Now we can drag our animation from here to the state machine and then compile it. Now we'll go into the third person character's blueprint. If you haven't already, you can change the mesh to your character. This is just because we are too lazy to set up our camera and everything for our character, so it's easier to just use the already made one. one. Next we'll scale it down and make it pretty much fit into this collision box. Now we go here on the animation section, animation class, and choose our animation. And there you have it, a custom animation for your custom character in your custom Unreal project running on your custom computer sitting on your custom table. Okay, but this looks a tiny bit weird that the character just stands and breathes while running. So to change this, we're going to add a running animation whenever the character starts moving. So to do it, we'll first create a running animation. As I did before, I challenge you to do it yourself. But no, you know what? I'm not even going to help you this time. You'll make your own running animation. Nah, I'm just pulling your leg. So we quickly change it to 60 FPS and add a keyframe at the beginning. We then move this leg backwards, this one forward, this one backwards, and then move this leg a bit. We can also make the character bow down a bit. Next we go forward 15 frames and make the legs switch places and the arms as well. We also make the character lean back a bit. Finally we skip 15 frames forward, copy all the keyframes from the first pose and add them to the end. Okay, now we can select our rig and choose create linked animation sequence. And bam, there we have it. Now in our state machine we can add another state and call it run, and we can then drag our running animation to that state. Now we hold down Control and drag an arrow from the idle to our running animation and the other way around. This tells the program that the idle animation can transition into the running one and the running one into the idle one. But now we need to tell the program when to do this. To do it, we can click this little thing here, and now we'll go into the event graph. So what we want to do is see if our character is moving and then play the animation if it is. To do this, we'll first cast our third person character, or our character that we are controlling when we start the game. We do this so that we then, as a third person character, can get the velocity of our character. We then get the length of our vector and check if the length is greater than 0. Now promote this to a variable, and if the length of our vector is greater than 0, we'll set this to true. We can here change the variable name to running or whatever you want to call it. It really doesn't matter, you could call it cool Fortnite if you wanted to. Then in our idle to run, get the Fortnite cool variable and check if it's true or not. If it is, it means that our character is moving and therefore we're going to play the running animation. Okay, this is great, but we also need to make our character stop running when it stops moving. We do this by opening this and getting Fortnite cool again. We then check if it's true or not, and if it isn't, we'll start the idle animation. And there we have it, a fully animated character. Remember to subscribe.